Let's go to the Dukes Mayo Bowl. Okay. Minnesota played really good football this year. Talk about two teams that I bet the under on Minnesota and I bet the over on Virginia Tech. And talk about opposite results happening there for me. And you know what? Max Brosmer's a dang good quarterback. You know, granted, and I'll let you talk about Minnesota more because you are our Minnesota mainstay guy. But a lot of really important opt outs, I think, for Minnesota in this game. But the same can be said about Virginia Tech, as well as injuries. Anise Pebbles, Antoine Powell Ryland, right, not playing on the defensive line for you for Virginia Tech, I think is a huge deal, especially when you're playing against a Minnesota team that hasn't run the ball particularly well all year, the way that at least they want to normally. Yeah, and if Darius Taylor gets going like he did against Wisconsin, right, late in that game, then I think Virginia Tech's in a lot of trouble here, right? But 7.5 points here, which is the line favoring Minnesota, is a lot. It is a lot. So I don't know. And uh, you have written down here in the notes that Brent Pry said apparently that players in the portal could potentially play.
Yeah, which would be a huge get for Virginia Tech. You're looking at a couple offensive linemen, you're looking at a couple linebackers, your best couple defensive backs. Listen, I don't know. I think could is the key word here too. Obviously, if he doesn't even know, we don't even know, right? And I'm sure we won't find out until who's dressing for Virginia Tech. I'm sure you can figure out who traveled with the team and figure out something like that. I don't know. I think it's a big deal. I think the bigger deal is not the portal players, it's the opt-outs, right? Couple really good defensive linemen, couple solid wide receivers. You got Tootin, the running back, and the injuries too with no with Kyron Drones as well. So I do think with Minnesota you do have opt-outs, but Max Brosman's playing, and that's a big deal because he has been awesome. You said it. He has been fantastic. I will stand by this fact. He's probably the best quarterback Minnesota's ever had. Maybe there's some guys in their 40s and 50s when they were winning national titles that was better, but I think we can realistically say Max Bosa is the best quarterback Minnesota has had in the modern era, right? And you got one more chance with him. Game 13, you're going to be down a couple of offensive linemen, right? You got your two tackles, Ariante Ursary, and your right tackle, who's going to the NFL, first round pick, hopefully. Right tackle, Philip Daniels, going to Ohio State, going back home for him, as well as your offensive lineman, interior 6-year guy, Tyler Cooper. The plan will probably be kick out, wow, I'm blanking his name right now. Quinn, the right guard, move
Quinn
him out to
Carroll.
left tackle. Quinn Carroll, right, to move him to left tackle, and then kind of reshuffle there with some depth pieces. So it'll be a good, test for some young kids from Minnesota on the offensive line. They have recruited well interiorly. Not too worried about that. You also have a couple defensive players I think might be a little bit more of a problem with Justin Wally. Probably no Danny Strigow and John Joyner, a couple edges you're going to be missing, as well as the most important one in Daniel Jackson, who is a wide receiver who is freaking awesome, who is really good for Minnesota. Probably, one of the better and most underappreciated wide receivers in all of college football. 75 receptions, 800
Seriously.
plus yards, 4 touchdowns on the year. Should have been higher, but he's
Yeah.
incredible.
You're like, and people that just look at that and be like, oh, he didn't have 1,000 yards. Oh, he didn't have 10 touchdowns. Like, no, you need to watch this guy. Like, legitimately go, and not just like highlights. And by the way, his highlight tape is ridiculous. Just go watch him play, dude. He's in and out of breaks. He's unbelievable. Okay, when we talk about draft sleepers, here in a couple months, Daniel Jackson's going to be on there, right? You better believe he's going to be playing in the NFL pretty dang soon. So him not playing, I think, is a huge deal because we haven't seen what this offense in the last 3 seasons. We haven't really seen what this offense looks like without Daniel Jackson, right? Because sometimes the pass game is only Daniel Jackson, and the surprise this year was when Elijah Spencer was able to add reinforcements through the air as well.
He's fantastic. So he steps into your alpha role. You'll obviously see more of Darius Taylor, the running back, not only on the ground as it is the standalone game. He's going to be very healthy. You've had all offseason. Remember last offseason or last bowl season when they played Bowling Green without a lot of players on the offensive side of the ball, he went 30 plus K. I mean, they ran him into the ground. I expect similar kind of output here from Darius Taylor with a couple guys in the portal and opting out at the running back position as well. But yeah, Spencer, Darius Taylor, Jameson Gears, and this is where you'll see more Lemecki Brockington and a couple guys from the young class of the wide receivers. I'm excited as a Minnesota fan here. I'm just going to put on my cap here and just see some young guys go out there and play. It'll be a fun game, fun bowl atmosphere there. It sucks that Virginia Tech has all those guys, could be missing right now, only opting out, but in the portal. You've got a new DC, Sean Quinn as defensive coordinator. 14 starters is a number that could potentially be out for Virginia Tech, which would be a
I,
big deal.
yeah, I think most importantly in that secondary, dude. I mean, your two highest snap getters were your cornerbacks. They didn't leave the field. Mansour and Dorian Strong. Now, I guess Mansour we don't know because he's transfer portal, right? But we know for a fact that Dorian Strong's opting out for the NFL, and he was their, best piece of their secondary, right? I mean, you can argue about who was their best defensive player, but Dorian Strong was well up there. He was an absolute menace, right? And then who's going to take his spot? I guess, right? And I don't know this roster like the back of my hand, right? Is it Dante Lovett, right? I don't know. I mean, this is a guy that's played a lot of snaps, right? But is he going to be ready to play outside corner right now in this spot? I mean, I think they're just thankful, right? Virginia Tech's not having to go against uh, Daniel Jackson. I really do think that, but I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah, on the other side, I'm excited to see Pop Watson, right? He's a guy that pretty exciting for Virginia Tech. Has been obviously a very good high school football player. Did some good things, early in his career in the spring practice. Obviously, he played in that Virginia game, which was a win. Took care of the football, 14-21. 250 yards, one touchdown. Obviously, it's Virginia. Might be a step up against Minnesota. However, you are missing a couple edge rushers, cornerback here and there. But you're also playing with one hand tied behind your back without a couple offensive linemen potentially, without a couple receivers. Those could be big deals when you're easing in, breaking in a young quarterback with not a ton of experience, as well as the running back, too, Tootin, who's been so good for multiple years now for Virginia Tech. 1,200 yards this year, just about. And yeah, and so now all of a sudden you're down to Conley and Malachi Thomas, guys that have less than 50 carries on the year. It's just putting more and more, responsibilities and stuff on Pop Watson. But he's a fun player for sure. He'll be exciting to play in the future for Virginia Tech. I think he'll be fun to be watching for years to come. But yeah, I like Minnesota in the spot here. 7.5. Obviously, would have loved to have gotten it when it opened. I think it was around 5.5. But fortunately, we're not recording until this is, the 29th, 30th, right, of December. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I like Minnesota minus 7.5 here.
Yeah, I'll take that as well. There's just so many opt outs here for Virginia Tech. Too, like when you're trying out this new offensive line for Minnesota, you're right. Like that is a big deal. Okay, but also losing 49 pressures and 14 sacks from Antoine Power Island, right? And then you're also losing 35 pressures from Aeneas Peebles on that defensive line. Like that's significant. That is very, very, very significant. Those are two of your best defensive players, right? Not to mention Dwayne Strong, Menser Dillon. I mean, what your five best defensive players are potentially not playing in this game, right? I I don't know. It'll be an interesting spot, right, for some of these young defensive linemen. Um, and Virginia Tech's rotated pretty decently, pretty heavily on the defensive line spot. So I'm not like challenging necessarily their depth. I just think the high end level, like elite talent that they had on the defensive side of the football that kept them in some games, it's not going to be there, right? So for a Minnesota team that's been playing so well, Max Brosmer playing his last game, looking to legitimately raise his draft stock, right? Like this is an important game for him. I think he gets it done. I don't like the 7.5. I would much rather like it at 6.5, but I thought about taking Virginia Tech in this spot just because, but that is a lot of points. But PJ Fleck in a bowl game too. I mean, what are we talking about here? So yeah, I'll take Minnesota, and quite frankly, not feel great about it. But what are you gonna do?